Thank you. We'd like to welcome you to First Congregational Church. And we just have to say how delighted we are with the turnout. This is far more than we ever thought. And Harry Rock and the 350th Committee has been working very hard for the last year and a half to put together this 350th celebration for our town. And we just couldn't be more delighted at the interest that we are seeing. So please keep coming. We'd love to see you all. First Church, as you know, was the first church of Westfield. It was established in the late 1600s, about the time that Westfield was established. Our very first meeting house was 18 feet by 18 feet, and probably looked a lot like the replica, which is in Stanley Park today. Many buildings later, several buildings later, and several moves later, this building was eventually our permanent building, and was built in 1860. Our first settled pastor was Reverend Edward Taylor, and he came to us via England to Boston to here in 1671. He was a young man right out of Harvard Divinity School, and coming to the wild, wild west, which at the time Westfield was the westernmost settlement. Little did he know that he would be serving as our pastor for 58 years. And not only was he our pastor, but he was the town doctor, and also later became known as one of the best colonial poets from all of the colonies in early America. So there will be a lecture on Reverend Taylor in March, right here back in our sanctuary, so we hope that you will come to attend that as well. I just want to say if there are any teachers from the Westfield district, please make sure that you sign in either out front or out here, because you do get PDPs for being here. And some of my students are here too, so they will get homework passes for being here. So thank you so much. We are sure that you're going to enjoy the lecture tonight. Cathy Pennington will be introducing our esteemed speaker. And I'd like to invite you all back to a reception, back through the door to your right, down the hall to our dining hall, where the ladies of the church have put together a wonderful reception. And I think, Mr. B, will you be staying to answer questions and talk with people afterwards? So please stay and enjoy. I'd like to introduce Cathy Pennington, who will be introducing our speaker.
This is a wonderful crowd. Thank you so much for coming. It's my pleasure to introduce Dennis, who's going to speak on Shay's Rebellion, as you all know. He served as a consultant on the filming of the award winner, A Little Rebellion Now and Then, which dramatized the years after the American Revolution that culminated in the Shay's Rebellion. He's been a museum professional in the living history field for 40 years. Must be old, Dennis. He began at Ulster Ridge Village and recently retired after 27 years as the director of Storyton Village. He's written many articles on the lifestyles and folkways of New England, and has also served as a consultant for many historical societies and museums. And I've known Dennis for quite a few years, and he's also helping us out at the Dewey House as one of our docents. So please welcome Dennis.
We have to wait for the microphones to transition here. Okay. Paris, January 30th, 1787. I hold it that a little rebellion now and then is a good thing, and is necessary in the political world as storms in the physical. Thomas Jefferson to James Madison. Fine for him to say he was in Paris. He didn't have to deal with these guys. But that quote is repeated over and over again about a little rebellion now and then. Thank you for having me tonight. I've been doing work on and off with Shay's Rebellion for quite a number of years now. As Candy mentioned, back during the bicentennial of Shay's Rebellion, there were several films that were made, and I was able to work as a consultant on one of them that was filmed in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire. And we dealt with some of the main issues which is rebellion, and it's actually still used in many schools today. Unfortunately, as with all films, it really dealt on a very basic level, and I am not going to overwhelm you with a lot of dates and a lot of names tonight. But let's talk a little bit about Shay's rebellion, reality, and perception. And every couple of generations, Shay's rebellion gets reinvented, kind of like Henry David Thoreau and other people, and Abraham Lincoln, to answer whatever the crisis or the angst is during that particular era. And over the years, we've, I think, lost sight of a lot of what Shay's rebellion was about and about what many of the people that were involved in Shay's rebellion were motivated by. We tend to think today that Shay's rebellion was the West against the East. It was the farmers against the merchants. It was that damn Boston, still to this day. You know, why can't we split off and become our own state? To a degree, part of that is true. There's a nugget of truth in there. There's enough truth that we can hold on to it, and again, as I said, we kind of spin it our way. But it wasn't as cut and dried as that. If we cast our mind back to the American Revolution, 1783, the American Revolution is all over, we all go home every year, you know, we're our own country, everybody's fat and happy. Not the case at all. As in any war, there were deaths. There was a cost to run the war. The Continental Congress had to pay for the war. And when it ended, they continued to have to pay. Now, different individuals and different colonies contributed to the American Revolution, to funding the American Revolution. And the number one funder as a colony to the Revolution was Massachusetts. So the war is over, and the Continental Congress now has to repay Massachusetts for all the money that they contributed. Massachusetts has to pay all of the troops that volunteer. Massachusetts is backed up by the merchants who had the cash on hand to be able to contribute to pay for the war during the Revolution. And now those merchants are looking at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and saying, you need to pay us. So everybody needs to get paid. Well, what are we going to get paid with? A lot of the farms that were around before the American Revolution had been poorly maintained at best or abandoned to a large degree, because many of the adult males were involved on one level or another with the war. And also in Massachusetts, we were providing a lot of the foodstuffs that were used by the soldiers. We were providing beef, we were providing corn, we were providing grain for the horses and the animals that were used by the army. So, as well as a lot of the horses and the oxen we were providing. So we had really been depleted agriculturally. So you've got the average person here in Massachusetts, doesn't matter where you are in Massachusetts, the average person in Massachusetts now needs to go to the local merchant and they need to buy seeds to start their farm. So you go over to Mr. Caleb Strong and you say, I need to buy so many bushels of seed so that I get my farm going again. Fine, it'll cost you X amount of money. Well, Mr. Strong, that's not how it's always worked. The way it works is you give me trust on your account book. And I will repay you for that seed when my harvest comes in. And Mr. Strong says, well, that's how it used to work, but now I need to buy glass and china and flatware for eating, and I need to buy all these things that we don't make here from merchants that are in Boston who are buying them, wholesalers, who are buying them from England in particular. Because we were still a huge trade partner to Great Britain. And they want their money now. Well, why would they do that? Because we just had a revolution. And we said, we don't want you guys anymore. And I'm saying, well, you know what? We're not extending you credit anymore. You have to pay. So the merchant finds that he has to start asking people for payment and not have them live on credit. So the average Joe goes to another store. He could go back to Mr. Strong, and he said, all right, I have oxen hide that you can turn into leather. I will give you oxen hide to pay for my seed corn. And the merchant said, what good does that do me unless I can sell that to a tanner, I can sell that to a shoemaker. You have to pay for your debts in gold and silver. Ooh. A gold, a guinea. Do we know what a guinea is? Guinea's a gold coin with gold that was mined in the African coast, so it's called a guinea. It's actually worth slightly more than a pound. So these were circulating since we didn't have gold mines that were operating at any extent at all. Very sorry. Anyway, we were still using gold that was from England, and that was pretty tough to get. Most people did not have a lot of gold to draw from. So you might also pay with a silver coin, and this is a Spanish real. Up until the 1850s, most silver coins that were circulating in the United States, especially in New England, were Spanish silver. They were still legal tender in this country. Again, because we didn't produce a lot of these ourselves. But most farmers did not have gold or silver. But that's what was in demand for pay. I'll give you another little bit of trivia. You have to make change for these things. So I have a Spanish real. A Spanish real is the value changes. You have to check your farmer's almanac to see exactly what it was trading at, because it's traded by weight. But if I take a Spanish real that's valued at $1, and I literally take an axe or a cleaver and I chop it in half, how many pieces do I have? And what are they worth each? 50 cents. If I take those two halves and take my cleaver and chop them in half, how many pieces do I have? And what are they worth? If I take bits, exactly, because if I take those pieces and cut them in half, how many do I have? Pieces of 8. And an eighth is called a bit. So a shave and a haircut's how much? 2 bits, which is 25 cents. But that is literally how they would make change with these coins. They would cut them up. Like I said, this is a real. This is a cob. This is a 2 pesos cob, and they would do the same thing. That would be valued at a certain amount of money. We did not have a lot of coinage that was made in this country outside of copper. We did have copper. And even back in the 1600s and very early 1700s, we were mining copper in this area, as you know, down in Simsbury, what's now East Granby. They were mining copper and illegally making coinage that circulated in this area. And they were very smart about that. They put actually on the coin, it says, "Value me as you will." Because if they said 1 pence, that's counterfeiting. But if you're valuing it by weight, which is what the Connecticut coins, and this happens to be a Massachusetts coin, it's valued by the weight, then you were not a counterfeit. You wouldn't be taken up on charges. So the merchant denies the small farmer the credit because he's being pressed, because he is in debt as well to those wholesalers. And the wholesalers on the coastal area are in debt because we just had this revolution and they won't take goods any longer to go overseas. So there is an old story about the chain of debt. And this chain of debt is what draws people into this resentment that grows into Shay's rebellion. Well, we've got a particular little twist here because our chain of debt doesn't go to Boston. We don't get here in Westfield in the 1700s, we don't get our stuff from Boston. Where do we get our stuff? Yeah, Wethersfield, New Haven. We actually have a chain of debt that goes down the Connecticut River. So as people become more and more indebted, the only answer for everyone in this chain is to go to court. And this kind of throws people off. It's not just the merchant, it's just not the wholesaler, it's the farmers too. The farmers need to go to court to sue for the debts that their neighbors owe them. Because there's an exchange of labor and exchange of goods. When it's plowing season, when it's haying season, when you need to buy some apple cider and you don't have an orchard, there's this indebtedness between farmers. So the farmers actually are suing themselves, are suing each other for this debt, as well as the ones that are further up on the line. So the myth that it's the farmers against the merchants is very much a myth. It's farmers against farmers. It's the society in general is in an upheaval over that. Now, if we superimpose on top of that, Massachusetts needs to pay back its taxes to the Continental Congress for the merchants that have paid for the Revolutionary War. So what do? They impose taxes. Remember the Boston Tea Party? What was that about? Taxes. Yeah, you remember the Intolerable Acts and the Stamp Act and all that? Taxes. And it was taxation without... Who's going to Boston? The farmers? The legislator? Who has time? I see Representative Hubbardson is not in the audience tonight. He usually comes to things like this. Who has time when you got your farm? Yeah, the rich. The people that are more idle, that are not producers with their physical labor. They're producers with their minds or whatever. They're the ones that can go to the legislature. So, the same sentiments that men and women and children were brought up with starting in the 1760s onward is still happening in Massachusetts after the American Revolution. So what do we do about it? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can write petitions and send them to the legislature. That's what we did. Of course, then they had to go overseas to the courts in England. But here we can send them to Boston. We can hold conventions. We can hold conventions in Whately, we can hold conventions in Hadley. We can hold conventions in which we talk about our grievances and ask the legislature to address our grievances. One of the big grievances that we have is when we go to court to collect debt or to defend ourselves against actions for debt, we have to have a lawyer. Lawyers cost money. Why am I in court? Because I don't have money. Okay? So one of the demands that the rebels had was the elimination of all lawyers in the Commonwealth. We all know how that worked out, right? Yeah. One of the other demands that they had in the conventions was we need to clear out the nest of vipers in Boston. We need to move the capital out where it'll be more responsive to the people, at least to Worcester, if not further west. And there's a great editorial from 1786 in one of the papers in Middlesex that talks about the imaginary wagon train, how many miles long it would be, carrying all the legislators and their assistants and their helpers and their secretaries and the assistant secretaries and all of their papers and moving them all to Boston. Well, we know how well that works too. So the rebellion was called at the time the War of the Regulators, or the War of the Regulation. Because what they were trying to do is they were trying to introduce regulations that would be fair to the whole population. One of the things that they asked for was paper money. It was not a great history in this country of paper money. Anybody remember from their elementary school days about the Continental dollars at the Continental Congress? How much is the Continental worth? Yeah, it changed by the week. Might say $1 on it, but with the inflation that happened, the value went down and down and down and down. So people that are in the hinterland that need to have this to pay him will go to the Colonel Towns and the Amadowns and the big families, the Deweys in the area, and they'll say, I need some of this. And they'll say, you give me 10 of those $1 notes, and I'll give you $1 real, which is worth $1. Because what the Amadowns and the towns and people like that do is they take this and they go to Boston and they say, remember how we paid for the war? I now want my money back, please. Because it's in their hands, it's their money. So what the regulators wanted is they wanted to have paper money that would be backed up by the state, by specie, by gold and silver. And most states refused to do that. Eventually, Rhode Island agreed to do that, and I may come back and talk about that a little bit. So, you've got the indebtedness to the businesses, you've got the indebtedness amongst each other, you've got the taxes, you've got the merchants that need the money. you try to do exactly the same thing that you just did with the British and won through petitioning, through court closures, and it's not working. So the next step actually is court closures. And what the regulators did is they would go to a court and they would block the doors so that the judges could not go into the courthouse. And if they couldn't go into the courthouse, then they couldn't hold the sessions. And if you can't hold the sessions, then these people that are there for debt can't go to trial. So that means that you've got an extension, you're still free and clear. And again, we get this impression that it's the East versus the West. Well, they closed the courts in Concord, they closed the courts in Salem, they closed the courts in Worcester, which is, mid-state, depending how you want to look at it. They closed the court in Great Barrington, they closed the court in Northampton, they closed the court in Springfield several times. Every time the courts tried to sit, the regulators would come and block their entrance in such large numbers. We're talking about thousands of men showing up. So the governor at the time, Governor Bowden, pushes through an act in the state legislature that says that any sheriff has the right to shoot to kill. Isn't that great? Any right to shoot to kill someone that's obstructing the courts. You also can be imprisoned for doing that. And not to get too far aside with anecdotal stories, but there actually were cases in which men were arrested, brought to by the local constables, brought to the local jail, and the regulators would show up. And the constables, when they're neighbors, they say, "Bert, come on, give me the keys. We're going to let these guys go home. Their wife's worried about them." And let them go. So everybody really kind of knew everybody. Why do we call this Shay's Rebellion? Well, Daniel Shay's born in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, moves around with his family, settles for a time in Pelham, and he is recognized after the Revolutionary War as someone who has a name that people will recognize. The problem with the regulators is it was all very, very local. And it was all run by local bigwigs, the big fish in a small pond kind of thing. But nobody really had statewide name recognition until Daniel Shay's came along. And Daniel Shay's, like many of the officers that were in charge of the companies of the regulators, had fought in the Revolution. He had been an officer during the American Revolution. He had been in several campaigns that we would recognize today. He was given a presentation sword by the Marquis of Lafayette. Okay, that's a big deal back then. So, reluctantly, he gets talked into heading up these group of people and being a spokesman. But every group had their own captains, and there were many of them throughout the state. Luke Day and West Springfield and Perez and Walker, they all had the same stature that Shay's did at their time, and Shay's the name that we remember. So after trying to close the court, or not trying to, but actually succeeding in closing the court, and what they were doing in closing the court is they're saying, please close the courts until the next seating of the legislature and the next gubernatorial election. We used to elect a governor every year, folks. Every year you had to run for governor. Okay? Bowden was not well loved. So, please just hold off pressing any of these issues until we can have another election. Again, they had learned this during the Revolution. That was supposed to be the answer. So 1786, we've got all these court closings. The winter of 86, 87, the Shayites decide that they need to do something that is higher than just closing court. They need to do something more radical. And the only way that they're going to be able to do that is to arm themselves. Most regulators, most Shayites were not armed. They didn't have firearms. Most of the descriptions of these court closures talk about people going to wood piles and pulling up sticks so they can knock the wigs off the judges and things like that. They don't have guns. They're just mass numbers. So Daniel Shays is in Worcester, closing the courts in Worcester. And it's decided that they will go to the Springfield Arsenal and they will seize the arms at the Springfield Arsenal. Now, we all know the armory today as a manufacturing plant. That's not what the Springfield Arsenal was at the time of Shay's Rebellion. At the time of Shay's Rebellion, the arsenal was a big warehouse. And what they had in the warehouse were firearms that came back from the American Revolution that needed repair or needed to be cleaned and put in working order so that if there was a need, again, they would be able to contribute to that need, ship the pieces. So this is the kind of weapon that was at the Springfield Arsenal. It's got an American-made barrel, it's got French hardware, it's got a British East India lock arm, and it's got an American-made stock, an American walnut stock. So it's made up of pieces. It's been repaired, it's been put in working order. But this is the musket, this is the firearm that was stored by the hundreds at the Springfield Arsenal. So these are the weapons that would help to allow the Shayites to move on to their next level. The other thing that they needed is they needed ammunition. This is the ammunition containment, ammunition pouch. But they needed ammunition because gunpowder and ammunition is not something, again, that most farmers had. Excuse me for a moment there. There's an advantage to standing by this duct because it's very warm and it's also very dry. Anyway, so they needed powder, they needed musket balls, and they needed the muskets to be able to carry on their protest against the government and hopefully bring people around to do what they wanted to do. So Shays takes his men, between 1,500 and 2,000, from Worcester, and he's going to march to Springfield. Okay? This is in the middle of January. So he gets to Wilbraham, and his men encamp in Wilbraham to prepare for the final march to Springfield and to take over the arms in Springfield. Luke Day has all his men in West Springfield, about 1,000, and he is going to come in from West Springfield and support Daniel Shays. Company of Berkshire men, about 1,200 or so, have come out from the Berkshires, and they are waiting in what's now Chickadee, which is part of Springfield at the time, for Daniel Shays to come in. And they were going to prevent any troops from coming from the north to support Shays and his men. Well, the word of this coordinated attack had got out. And what Governor Bowden had done, time after time, when the courts were closed, is he had called out the local militia. The militia is under the command of the governor. So he calls out the militia to help with the courts. And what he finds out is when the militia troops show up to oppose the Shayites, remember I told you about that constable guy? They were saying, hey, Bert, you're in the militia, come on, man. You know you really should be over here with me. And it was the same people. It was the neighbors, you know? So what Governor Bowden does, along with the urging of many of his supporters, which were well-to-do merchants in Boston, is they hire their own army. They create the governor's army. And they put in command Lincoln, and they march from Boston along the Post Road again to try to get to Springfield. They're several days behind Daniel Shays and his men. So, what are you going to do? Well, the word was sent out again as a stopgap measure that we need to have militia to defend the arsenal. Who owns the arsenal? The United States government. Well, it's not the United States, the Confederation, Confederated States, under the Continental Congress, owns the arsenal. Commonwealth of Massachusetts doesn't own the arsenal. So, in many ways, it's none of the governor's business what happens at the arsenal. It's in his state, it's in his commonwealth, but it's not his problem in a way. But he needs to defend it. So who is he going to call out? His go-to guy. And who's his go-to guy? Statue's right up there. General Shepherd. General Shepherd was a lieutenant colonel and colonel during the American Revolution. His title as general comes about through the Massachusetts militia. He wasn't a general in the Continental Army, he was a colonel. But he had fought as a colonel for all 6 years of the war. When they closed the courts in Northampton and in Springfield, who was there? Shepherd. Shepherd was in charge of the troops. So he was the go-to guy in this area. So Shepherd calls out his local militia, and he calls out militia from the area, and they come with him to defend the arsenal. Now the arsenal, as well as having muskets, happens to have artillery pieces. Ooh, even better. So he draws out the artillery pieces from the arsenal. Now, he had no rights to do this. He's operating as an officer. He's not in the Continental Service anymore. He's in the state militia. He really has no right to that. But one of his pals from the old days, when he was in the Army, happens to be Knox, Secretary of War. Okay? Knox is the one who's really in charge of the army. So, and Knox was in charge of the trail of artillery during the American Revolution. So, he's got these connections with these officers and former officers that allow Shepherd to feel comfortable with taking charge of the army. Well, Luke Day sends a message to Daniel Shays, says, you know, we need to delay the attack by 1 day because we haven't got all the men in position right now. That message gets intercepted, so Shays never gets it. Shays in Wilbraham, Shays gets a hold of the local sheriff, gives him a note, and says, go to Springfield and tell them we're on our way. Because he basically expected to have the same kind of passive resistance that happened when the courts were closed. That they would show up, there'd be a little show, and he'd be able to walk off with the guns. Well, they didn't know about General Shepherd. So they come marching from Wilbraham without the support of the troops from the Berkshires or Luke Day on the other side of the river. And I just have to tell you this aside because I find it such a hoot. I was reading an expert's analysis of the action at the armory, and this expert said that one of the problems was that Luke Day's fleet did not come to support Daniel Shays. So I think because he was called Captain Day, he thought he was a sea captain or something. But I can just imagine this movie being made with this fleet of ships sailing up the Connecticut River and bombarding. But you didn't hear that from me. That was from an expert. That wasn't from me. Anyway, so Luke is waiting over there on the green, in West Springfield. Here's all this musket fire and stuff. Well, he never heard this. He doesn't know that Shays didn't get the word. Shays marches his men from Wilbraham to Springfield in snow that is anywhere between thigh high and 4 feet deep, with a crust on it. They said the crust was really bad, it would cut up their legs as they marched through it. You didn't want to be the first guys in the column, you wanted to be further back. So they get to Springfield Arsenal on the hill, and they form up in companies and in regiments, as they had done during the Revolutionary War. And Shepherd takes his artillery pieces, loads them, and fires them over the heads of the Shayshites. Now, the Shayshites didn't know this, but one of the eyewitnesses accounts said you could tell the veterans in the command of Daniel Shays, because the minute they saw the cannon being ignited, they laid down on the ground. And once they heard the boom, they stood up, because they knew the cannon was then discharged, and they were safe. Here's another aside. The Shayshites are always pictured as being, they're the downtrodden veterans of the Revolutionary War. Shays' men were, former Continental soldiers or former state troops during the Revolutionary War. Well, yes and no. Just about every year of the 6 years of the American Revolution, over 50% of all the troops under the command of George Washington were from Massachusetts. Over 50% wasn't the same people every year, but every year more people from Massachusetts served in the colonial troops than any other state, or all the other states combined. So, yeah, there were a lot of veterans that were with Daniel Shay and his other commanders, but General Shepherd had a whole lot of veterans with him, too. That's why they were able to command the cannons properly. So when the Shayshites did not turn and run after Shepherd fired the warning shot, Shepherd commanded that the cannon be lowered to chest height and loaded the cannon with grape shot, which are about inch diameter balls. And he fired into the advancing Shays troop, killing 3 of them immediately, and one wounded so bad that he died a couple hours afterwards. All the other Shayshites decamped and left to the north and caught up with the Berkshire troops in Chicopee and kept heading north. As the troops left, the scream, the cry of murder rose from the Shayshites. Never had anything like that happen before. Shepherd changed the game. That's not the way we play this game. We play the game the way we close the courts. We don't play the game where you shoot cannons at us. Nobody expected that. That's why they all decamped and left. Of course, Shepherd didn't know if they were going to come back. Shepherd said later he could have sent troops to catch up with them and rout them, but he didn't know what was going to happen. So he stayed at the armory and waited for Lincoln and Bowdoin's army to show up, which they did. The Shayshites withdrew up through Chicopee, through South Hadley, and through Granby, and through Amherst. And when they got to Amherst, about 10 sleighs full of food and supplies had all been packed to go with them. And they went up to the hills in Pelham. And Lincoln's army pursued them. Now, there are many stories, local stories, and sometimes, legends, again, have that nugget of truth in them. But there's a great story from South Hadley. There's a house that stands to this day in South Hadley where the Shayshites broke in and they were looking for food, mostly for liquor. And they were turned away, and on the wall of this fireplace breast in the parlor, you can actually still see the bayonet marks where they were threatening the women that were there. You gotta give us the key, you gotta let us into the cellar, and they never did. So you can view that to this day. Has anybody ever hiked to the horse caves on the Mount Wheel Bridge? Okay, the Shayites, some of the Shayites stayed in the horse caves, overhangs, overnight. And there's a story in Granby that one father was looking for his son who was with the Shayites. And he followed along behind the troops. And what he found was the yarn from his son's hat that had snagged on a twig and unraveled and left the trail all the way to the horse caves. And that's how he found his son and told him, your mother's pretty worried about you. You need to go home. That's one of the kind of fun local legends. During the attack on the armory and during the actions of the courts, since again, everybody is neighbors and everybody is there protesting or defending the state, how do you know who's who? The Shayites put hemlock in their hat. Hemlock and pine had been the symbol of New England for hundreds of years by the time we get to the time of the American Revolution. The state troops fold up white papers, and they put the white papers, because of the paper that the legislator wrote on, they put the white paper in their hats. So you could tell friend from foe by what they had stuck in their hats. Lincoln's troops, Governor Bowdoin's troops, caught up with the Shayites in the hills of Pelham and Petersham after an all-night march in a driving snowstorm. They surrounded the Shayites. They negotiated. The Shayites were totally taken by surprise. The next morning, as the sun rose, to be surrounded by General Lincoln's troops. And they surrendered, or the ones that were left, because most of them had disappeared in the countryside. And the leaders who were under indictment from the governor slipped away. And many of them, like Daniel Shay, went to Vermont. Vermont was an independent republic. It had no extradition to the 13 colonies, to the 13 parts of the Confederation. So you could go to Vermont and you would be safe. You couldn't be seized there. And Daniel Shay eventually moved from Vermont to New York and set himself up in New York. One of the other leaders, Parmenter, Captain Parmenter, who lived in Berniston, had gone to Vermont to set a farm up for himself, but he wanted to come home during the winter, that same winter of 1787. Come home and get some of his clothes and his other goods. So he's in a sleigh, 2 sleighs, he and friends coming back to Berniston, and they have, wouldn't you know it, you go out in the middle of the night and you run into another sleigh. He has a collision with another sleigh. The person in the other sleigh pulls out a gun and says, "Oh!" So Parmenter shoots him. I shot the sheriff, but I didn't. Yeah, the guy happens to be a sheriff for Franklin County. Oops. So Parmenter is indicted not only for treason and sedition, he's now indicted for murder. And he's captured the next day and brought to the local jail. He basically pled not guilty. He said, this person pulled a gun at me. He didn't say, I'm the sheriff. I thought he was a highwayman, and I was only defending myself. Well, he got thrown into the county jail and sentenced to death over that. He was one of the few people, he and McCulloch were thrown into jail, brought to Northampton, and sentenced to death because of that. But I digress. Everybody knows about Shay's Rebellion and the armory, but nobody really knows about the only real stand-up, shoot muskets at each other battle. That never happened at the armory. That happened in Sheffield, Massachusetts, where I happened to be the director for a number of years of the Historical Society. And again, the same winter in February 1787, the following month after the arsenal, several Shayites leaders and their followers came back over from New York State and raided some homes in Great Barrington and Stockbridge, and they took several lawyers. Remember, they took several lawyers captive, including this gentleman by the name of Sedgwick, who owns a slave, Mumbet, who buys for her own freedom. That's a whole other story. Mumbet actually protected the Sedgwick house from being looted. She was very loyal to the Sedgwick family. Anyway, Sedgwick and these other lawyers are marched off in February in their underwear on their way back to New York. And General Ashley, and you can still go visit the General Ashley house today, it's a trustees of reservation property, but General Ashley calls out his troops from Sheffield, and in the middle of a cornfield, or the residue of the cornfield, this is in the winter, they had a stand-up, shootout exchange of muskets, just like you would have seen in the American Revolution, and 5 people were killed outright, and 30 were wounded. That was the last battle of Shay's Rebellion. Just before the battle in Sheffield took place, up in Great Barrington, where they were trying to close the court again in Great Barrington, the state had sent out troops. General Lincoln was only a day or 2 away, so they figured they could hold these guys off, the local militia. Well, what the Shayites did was they went to a family's home and had a big barn loom, and they took the beam that the weft is wound on, the warp is wound on, and they put it on 2 wheels and rolled it out to the edge of the hill overlooking the courthouse and convinced the militia that it was a cannon. And the militia went away. So they were emboldened in Worcester County. So the last battle takes place. In the springtime, we have our elections, which is what the Shayites were trying to do in the first place, is just postpone things until the elections would be over. Bowdoin gets voted out as governor. John Hancock comes back in. Hey, everybody likes Hancock, right? Hancock comes back in. The leaders of the opposing armies and the militia to the Shayites asked the governor to please pardon most of these guys. And most of the leaders were pardoned. The individual soldiers who took place in Shay's Rebellion were required to take an oath of allegiance. If they did not take an oath of allegiance, they could not serve in any public office. They couldn't be a selectman, they couldn't be the town clerk, they couldn't be the hog reeve, they couldn't teach school in the Commonwealth until they took an oath of allegiance. And that's actually how we know a lot about the individuals that were involved in Shay's Rebellion by reading these oaths of allegiance. And we find out that many areas contributed large numbers of Shayites, and other areas contributed none at all. So you find places like West Springfield that produces a huge number of Shayites, whereas Granville produces very, very few, actually only 1 that can be documented. But there are more people in debt and being sued in Granville than there are in West Springfield. So it's not as simple as just the debt. And I want to specifically tell you about Westfield. In Westfield, 85 men took the oath of allegiance. So there are 85 men here that admitted to being Shayites. 6 of them were nobles, 4 of them were duties. So the big names about town, it all had to do with family and who you knew and what your connections were. When the new legislature comes in, they look at what the Shayites were asking for, and they didn't give them anything 100% that they were looking for. They never moved the capital out of Boston, for one thing. They didn't eliminate attorneys, but they created the Justice of the Peace Courts, JP courts. And in the Justice of the Peace Court, you did not have to have a lawyer. So you still need to have a lawyer for higher crimes and misdemeanors, but you did not have to have a lawyer when you went to these new JP courts. The JP courts were named by the county and by the town. So they would be your neighbor that you were going in front of. It wouldn't be some judge that was named by the governor who traveled around the circuit by the state. So there were some reforms, and one of the bigger reforms is Massachusetts, along with Rhode Island and other places, started printing paper money. And in Rhode Island, not only did they print paper money, but they passed laws that say, you must take my paper money. If you don't take my paper money, I'm going to put your name in the paper and leave it at the newspaper office. And if you don't come get it, then my debt's erased. Wow, because you still got to pay for your stuff, you know. So that put places like Rhode Island in a very tricky situation. It was so tricky that Rhode Island did not approve the constitutional form of government in the United States until George Washington had been president for 1 year. Because they knew if they approved the Constitution, their money would go out. Now, we do know that down in Philadelphia, when they had the Constitutional Convention and they were discussing the different plans that should be used to create this central government, whether it should be a strong central government or a weaker central government, we do know that they actually discussed Shay's Rebellion. And they said it was a perfect example that if we don't have some kind of strong government that can command its own troops, that we'll end up having things like Massachusetts and New Hampshire had the same kind of rebellion, and Maryland had the same kind of rebellion, and South Carolina had the same kind of rebellion, but we don't really hear much of those. But other states kind of result. We're going to have this happening over and over again. So they went with the Virginia plan, which was a stronger plan for the central government, and it created the Constitution that we operate under today. And that is a summation of the beginning, middle, and end of Shay's Rebellion. I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can. Yes, in the back.
Where did they camp in Chicopee?
They camp in Chicopee, where the bridge over the river into, I'll tell you where the bowling at. The bridge isn't there anymore, but there was a covered bridge that went over to what's now West Springfield. And the covered bridge had been created just a couple of years before Shay's Rebellion, and that's where they encamped, was over right on that, because that was the choke point, was at the bridge. There in Chicopee. Yes. Oh, absolutely. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes. General Shepherd comes home. He gets a letter of commendation from Governor Bowdoin about what a fantastic job that he did. The problem was, those 80-plus Shayites in town, they didn't forget what he did. Remember that cry of murder that came out. They tore down his fences. They burned his woodlot. They cut the ears off of his horses. Yeah. And they continued to harass him to the point where his farm became unmanageable. I mean, they would trample crops. This would be things that would happen at night. So he was continually harassed. We really forget that part of it. He tried to return to be involved with this church. He was a member of this congregation and very much involved with the church. He continued to be involved with the government. When Washington came to Springfield, he was invited to have lunch with him, which he did. He was still a big man about town. So, just slightly less than 100 years ago, it'll be 100 years ago in September, they put up the statue to him. The statue was put up in September 1919. They had started raising money 5 years before, but the statue was put up in 1919. So enough time had passed that families had forgot that he was the one that had ordered an action that ended with the death of some of the Shays. It also happened. It didn't end up with his death, but he also injured one of his own men that was firing a cannon, misunderstood the commands, and he ran the rammer down when they set the charge off, and it took his arms off. he lived. Can you imagine that in the 18th century, that he actually lived? But anyway, so yeah, the statue out there, where not only is this, you know, the anniversary of the city, but it's going to be the 100th anniversary of the Shepherd statue, too. Yes?
When Massachusetts was involved in the ratification of the Constitution, Massachusetts had a very close vote, as I remember.
Voted several times, yes.
And not only that, but the people who were negative, were many were Shay's people. You know, Blanford ordered Blanford was not very much involved with a lot of things.
Right.
They sat there. The person who was actually on the blacklist for having been a Shayite.
Right.
He was the person sent to Boston to vote against the idea
of a strong central government. And that was, again, that was the beauty as far as the Shay sites are concerned. When that election came up, their guys got to go. So they saw that as a positive thing. But yeah, there were quite a number of people that were on that governor's blacklist that ended up going to the legislature. Yes?
Can you talk about how the whole currency issue got resolved?
It got resolved because they started to allow paper money to be accepted as payment. So the farmers could use the paper money and not have to go out with gold and silver, which didn't exist as far as they were concerned. That became official currency, and we also had an economic boom that happened. So, you know, a high tide floats all ships, right? So everybody got pulled up a little bit in that. And it goes down again, there's nowhere we can go, but we're not going to. Yes, in the back. On debts? Debts could be anything from $20 down. And most skilled tradesmen, you're looking at 75 cents to $1 a day as far as earnings go. So $20 and down was not uncommon for a debt. The problem was, no matter what the value of the debt, it dominoed. It went from year to year to year. And that was all subject to accruing interest on that debt. So once you became indebted, there was very few ways to get out of debt. What the local sheriff did, this is a whole other talk, but the way the legal system worked back then, is the local sheriff would imprison you for debt and allow you what was called freedom of the yard. And the sheriff would decide what is the yard. So if you happen to be a cooper, he might decide for you the yard included your shop at home, so you could still work. So it wasn't as crazy as what we think of where, you know, you keep people in cells for debts. And that was part of the winning strategy with the JP courts. The JP courts only went up to so much money. And it was mostly these little things that were the pitnesses that were annoying for the agricultural families. And the small shoemakers and the other small shops. Yes?
One of the things that also helped confuse the era was that prior to the federal constitutional government, each state had its own currency.
Right.
And also they had tariffs at every border. If you're going to Connecticut to visit, you have to pay a tariff to bring your goods back and forth.
And that was one of the threats that actually brought Rhode Island into approving the Constitution. It said, if you don't approve the Constitution, we will blockade you, and we will put tariffs on you, or we'll divide you between Connecticut and Massachusetts. We'll just divide you up. And they've already voted for it. But the threat was, if you want to be that independent, then you're going to be independent. No. And that's why we need to keep remembering history, because things don't change. People keep coming up with the same solutions to the same problems, and it doesn't work. Well, General Knox was granted a lot of land up in Maine, and he became quite a land holder after the war. Shays came back to Massachusetts several times, and eventually was granted a pardon. He ended up living in New York. He opened a tavern in New York, and he's buried in Sparta, New York. But he decided he wasn't going to come back and live here anymore. A lot of the other Shayside captains just went back home and continued with their lives. One more quick one, and we got. Yes.
The South Historical Society is having a talk by a man who found out that there was a settlement that the Shaysites developed in Vermont.
Yes.
And that's his talk.
She said the Southwick Historical Society is having a talk about a settlement that was developed in Vermont by Shayside. And there is, I've been to a couple of sites in Vermont. There was a great archaeological dig that was done I don't know, maybe the same guy that did the archaeological dig. Yeah. And they created their own farming community there where they were being harassed. Well, thank you very much for your patience for listening.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I think Harry Rock was going to come down and say a word or two. Oh, here he comes. Here's our fearless leader of the 350th, Harry Rock.
Thank you very much. I've been up filming this thing because our normal film guy is at another engagement. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I am just thrilled to again see a huge response to our lecture series. We started off a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Bob Brown at the university and had a huge turnout there. And just so excited to see the turnout tonight. Just really, really pleased. We have had two major priorities with the whole 350. One, that it be about families, and two, that it be educational, that we have an opportunity to really learn about our city, to learn of our history, our heritage, to appreciate where we have come from, to allow us to reflect on where we are today. That creates the inspired vision of the future of tomorrow. And you are just feeding into this. I'm just so excited to have you here. We are certainly thankful and want to extend another round of applause to Dennis Picard on his presentation. I find that some things never change. It's always about money. It's always about those lawyers. I like the idea that we were going to ban them from Massachusetts, just get rid of them. It hasn't worked out so well, but we can continue to work on that. And I also want to say thank you to Cindy Gaylord, Rick Gaylord, for opening the doors to this beautiful church. What a place to have our lectures. So we've got a lot of things happening. How many people went to first night? Lots of hands. What a phenomenal evening that was for all of our families, even in the rain. We probably had about 3,000 people, a little bit more than that. Just a huge turnout on that. How many people love our cake out in the green? Is that not beautiful? Just love that. And thank you to the West Tech Architectural Woodworking up on the north side who built that for us. And that will be up a good part of this year. 350 candles on that. It was out this weekend, not because we had purposely turned it off. The GFI circuit up on the pole, that the G&E controls had gone bad in all the rain that we had, but they've replaced that, so the cake should be going fully. It follows the circuit of the school of the street lights. So when the street lights come on, that's when the cake will come on. Our next lecture that we are going to have is on the Canal Greenway, from the history of the canal to the modern rail trail. It is scheduled to be, it is next Wednesday. They're all on Wednesdays at 6:30. It will be on January 16th. Right at this point, it is scheduled to be at the Westfield Athenaeum. However, I've been talking with Cindy Gaylord about the fact that as I look at all of you, and I think about the size of the Athenaeum downstairs, we aren't going to make it. So we are considering moving it here. We have to check schedules and stuff, and we are thinking about really trying to move all the Athenaeum talks here just because of the pure numbers. But the place to check that will be on our website, westfield350.org. If you go there, you will find the lecture series. We will announce it there. We're also on Facebook. We're very active on Facebook, so go to Westfield 350 if you're onto Facebook at all. And those will be the two primary places that we will have it. And then we will also have some signage at the Athenaeum if we make a change on the location. Unfortunately, it's just across the green. Other than that, we are just thrilled that you're here. We're excited about 2019 going forward. We have certainly successfully launched. Educationally, we've got a lot of lectures coming up. Make sure that you get the placards, the rec cards. They're at both tables out in the front and out in the sanctuary where these snacks are. We do have our history book for sale, $39.95. It is selling off the shelves. It is going very, very well. We ordered 2,000, and that will be the only run we have. So when it's done, it's done. So you want to get it now while we still have it. We also have our coveted hats. Those knit hats with the fleece lining that they'll cut down the wind that we have out there tonight, and also our scarves. Other than that, the other thing that I will let you know about is our race series. We have a 7th race series, of which if you enter 5 of those, whether you're a walker or a runner, you will qualify for one of the beautiful jackets that we will have with the monogram 350 logo on it. So you can walk with me, or you can run with Vanessa Deanna, who is putting this whole thing together for us. I just want to say quickly, thanks to our board of directors for the 350, all the volunteers that have been working on the 350. Volunteers, I love them. Best people in the world because they do it because they choose to, and they have been, they have just been through this entire thing to do all the planning to get us to where we are now, where we're rolling these things out. So other than that, I don't know. Yes, thank you. So we are going to exit stage, my left, your right, for snacks. But we will see you on Wednesday, January 26th for the Canal Greenway and the story of the modern rail trail. On the 16th, what did I just say? 26th, 16th, thank you. Next Wednesday, the 16th. But do keep tabs. We probably think we'll be here if it works out for us. Thanks so much for coming.
Right.